Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Daily Gwei Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and it's the 22nd of April, 2024. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So before we get into today's episode, just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who reached out to me, both in the Discord channel and on Twitter and on Telegram, with all of your words of support after what I talked about on Saturday about how I need to pretty much take a break from crypto, I think, at this point in time. Now, I did think a lot about this over the last kind of 48 hours since I put that episode out, and I've kind of come up with a little bit of a game plan that if you'll indulge me in for a couple of minutes here, I do want to detail because I think it's important for you guys because it involves no refuels for 2 weeks. Now that may come as a bit of a some sad news to a lot of you. It's sad news to me, but I think that I'm at the point where I need to do this. I thought about an analogy today about how I'm feeling. I'm basically like a car that's had its check engine light on for a very long time, and I've ignored it for that whole time. And that's basically where I'm at right now. I'm running on fumes. I need to take a pretty hardcore break, I think, where I just don't focus on crypto. It's not like a holiday where I go away but I'm still on my phone, still on my laptop focusing on crypto. No, I feel like I do need to take a proper break here. So the game plan that I came up with is basically that I will do the refuel for the rest of this week. You guys know I'm heading to Sydney next week for a crypto event for ETH Global Sydney, as well as a bunch of side events around that. So what I thought of is that I'm not going to do any refuels next week. So originally I was going to do a refuel on Monday and Tuesday, but I won't do any refuels next week, but I'll still be around on Twitter, on Discord, things like that. I'll still be kind of doing things, just maybe less than what I've been doing them traditionally. And then the week after that, when I kind of get back home and everything, there's going to be no refuels that week either, but there's also going to be no crypto at all for me. I'm not going to do any Twitter, no Discord, none of that. And you won't be able to reach me basically unless it's critically important. Maybe you can, if you've got me on Telegram, you'll be able to reach me there. But yeah, I'm going to basically take that whole week off kind of crypto altogether and do a bunch of other things. I have a bunch of other things I've been wanting to do for a very long time, and I'm going to take that opportunity to do that. So just fair warning here, I'll do refills for the rest of this week. Hopefully no rug fills this week. And then the following 2 weeks, there will be none. But I can't make any promises that I will be back after that either. I said in the Discord channel today that I've gotten to the point where I'm not having fun anymore. I remember I said a long time ago on the refill that if this stopped being fun for me, that's when I'd stop doing it. And at this point in time, it's become not fun anymore. It is really mentally taxing for me to do anything crypto related at this point in time. I find myself just not enjoying it as much as I used to, and I think that is not a function of me not being interested in it. It's a function of me spending so much time within the ecosystem and burning myself out. So I really do think I need to take this break now, or else it's just going to get worse and worse, and I may just get to the point where I literally snap and just delete everything and that's it, I'm gone. I don't want that to happen. I want to be around. I want to still be doing the refuel. This is my, this is the thing I'm most proud of in my life. One of the things I'm most proud of in my life is all the work that I've done on the refuel, building this great community around the Daily Gwei, and I do feel really guilty about this as well, guys. I know you guys are going to say not to feel guilty about it, but I do, and I apologize that I have to do this. I wish I could go, on without having to take breaks or anything, because I love it so much, and I love, getting feedback from you guys about how much you love the show and how much you love all the coverage that I bring, and that I keep you bullish when things are bearish. I love all of that. But, I'm a human like the rest of you, and I do feel like at this point in time, I need to take a break for my own physical and mental health, because my body is screaming at me and my mind is screaming at me. So that's what's going to happen. So just a reminder, not this week, but the following 2 weeks, there will be no refuels. And then for that kind of a second week there, I will be not contactable. I will not be on the Discord or anything like that. I trust that the mods on the Discord will be able to handle any scammers or spam in there and anything that happens there, but I will still be reachable via things like Telegram for people who have me on there for critical things. If it's not critical, I will not reply to it. That's kind of my plan there, and I'm going to avoid Twitter. And this will be the first time, as I mentioned on last episode, this will be the first time I'm doing this in a very, very long time, in 7-8 years. This is the first time, and it's kind of scary, but I'm kind of excited about it too, to see how I feel, because I really do think it's what I need right now. But anyway, enough boring you with all of those details. Just figured I'd let you guys know and give you that heads up there. But thank you for sticking with me all this time, and I hope you'll still be around when I come back from my break. Not this week, obviously, but the following 2 weeks there. But the rest of this week, as I said, is still going to be a refuel. So let's get into the meat of today's episode, which is a little bit light on content because I did do an episode on Saturday, but still a lot of exciting stuff to talk about. So first things first. The ETH ETFs. I put this tweet out yesterday where I said, I still think the ETH ETFs are being approved on May 23rd. And I still think that, guys. I really do still think that. Obviously, no one else thinks that at this stage. Very few people think that at this stage. But I still think it's getting approved on May 23rd. And I think I said either on the Refuel recently or in the Discord channel recently that even if we don't hear anything by the end of April from the issuers and the SEC, I'm still just going to stick with my prediction of it being approved on May 23rd. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I don't care at this point, honestly. Like, everything in me believes that they should be approved based on the facts and circumstances. But if they're denied, I'm just very curious to see how they're going to get denied. I'm betting on them getting denied based on the spot futures correlation thing, which all that does is kick the can down the road. It actually doesn't do anything else except that. Like, the ETFs will eventually be approved from there. But at this point, I'm just like so over this discussion. So I was like, you know what? I still think they're going to be approved. I'm going to keep my odds at 100% for May 23rd. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'll eat that. I'll own that. I don't really care at this point in time. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is because Andy here actually quote tweeted my tweet and basically said, Ethereum has so many positive catalysts ahead of it and yet still so many haters. And I wanted to talk a little bit about these today. So obviously he said that the ETF is a positive catalyst. Now, as I said, if the ETF happens on May 23rd or it happens later, I don't think it really matters that much at this point in time. I think that regardless, ETH is getting an ETF and that will be bullish. And honestly, as I've said before, you guys know that my belief is that even if the ETH ETFs are denied on May 23rd, that is still going to be bullish for ETH. I don't think that's going to be a bearish thing for ETH at all, really. And I'm curious to see what the volatility is around that date as well. And I'm curious to see, like, if we actually get some back and forth between now and then, like, does that make the market more confident in the ETH ETFs being approved on May 23rd? We'll have to see there. But also the fact that, layer 2 fees are still way down after blobs went live. And layer 2s are growing so much right now, guys. Like, I know that in crypto, we tend to have like these volatile growth periods where things will spike up and then come back down and spike up and then come back down. But with L2s, it's really been a gradual thing. We have had spikes here and there. Obviously, meme coin season on base happened recently and a few other things happening there. But really, it's been a gradual growth of these kind of top L2s where they keep getting usage. And even the ones with existing tokens. Like, for example, Arbitrum has its token. It's had its token for a very long time now. And yet the Arbitrum ecosystem continues to grow. Optimism has their token already, which means there's not really any airdrop farming going on. They're doing just fine as an ecosystem. Base said they're not going to have a token. Maybe they do one day. I mean, I've said I think they're going to have a token, but I doubt there's very much airdrop farming happening on base, right? As opposed to what was probably happening with the other ones out there. Now, there are other L2s that still haven't done their tokens, and there's probably airdrop farming happening there, but generally the trend has been up. And I'm going to talk a lot about the L2 growth in a little bit. I've got that set aside for later in the episode. And then Andy mentioned that the modular app chain evolution cements Ethereum as a settlement layer. This is a big one and something that I think is under-discussed within the broader crypto ecosystem, even within the broader Ethereum ecosystem. Now, I've been calling Ethereum a settlement layer for as long as I can remember. Like, you can go back and find me saying this probably back in the ETH Hub days, if not before that on Twitter, about Ethereum becoming this settlement layer. Now, so specifically Ethereum being a settlement layer for L2s and for rollups / L2s, whether they store their data on Ethereum or not. Ethereum is that central hub there. And that is really bullish for Ethereum because it basically means that Ethereum is the de facto kind of like secure hub for all of these L2s. Because people will often argue and say, oh, well, Ethereum is not the only chain that can do L2s. These other chains can do L2s as well. And it's like, yes, okay, fair enough. But do they offer the same things that Ethereum offers? No, they do not. Ethereum is the most resilient and decentralized and secure settlement layer in the world. Like, I would argue it's even more resilient, secure, reliable, decentralized than Bitcoin layer 1. Like, I would make that argument, but I'm not going to make that argument now because it is a longer argument, but you guys have heard my points around that before. So I believe that the most successful and the biggest L2s will settle to Ethereum and will continue to settle there. And the cool thing about this is that they can settle to Ethereum using it as a data settlement layer or not. And right now, it's actually free to put your data on Ethereum. So it makes no sense for you to be a Validium unless you're trying to scale up to, or unless you're expecting to scale up to like thousands of TPS or something, and then you'll exceed 4844's data capacity. But for all the existing L2s or rollups that use Ethereum as a data availability layer, it's free right now to post your data. Now, obviously, that's not going to be the case forever, but Ethereum's rollup-centric roadmap is centered around making data as cheap as possible there. So there's that going on there. And then, of course, the EIP 1559 burn is working as expected. I know fees have been relatively low recently in the single-digit Gwei amounts, but that's not going to last forever, guys. That is because the market generally is quiet right now. There's not much activity happening across the board, really. It's not just with Ethereum; it's with everything right now. And I think that once that kind of resets, we'll see that activity picking back up. And I know some people will be thinking about the recent Runes launch on Bitcoin, where Bitcoin daily fees spiked up massively. I think they had like a day of $100 million worth of 24-hour fees. But that's an outlier. Like, I'm talking about the, I guess, like weekly, monthly trends here, not the daily trends, because the daily trends are always skewed. I mean, if you want to compare what happened with Runes on Bitcoin to what happened today's on Ethereum, you can compare it to the Yuga Labs other side mint that ended up happening, I think it was in like 2022, where there was a lot of fees. Like, I think it was hundreds of millions of dollars of fee revenue on Ethereum L1 for that day or two that was happening there. And that was a once-off there. Yes, Ethereum fees have been relatively high over the month-on-month, year-on-year period there. And Ethereum has been burning those fees, or most of them, which Bitcoin does not do, by the way. But yeah, when you look at those kind of outliers, there's not really anything going on. I actually think that money that was used to on those Runes things, most of that money was literally just like throwing it away. You may as well have thrown that money away, because the things that people were minting and things that people were doing with it, I think, from what I've seen, they didn't really come out ahead. Now, the only people that came out ahead were the Bitcoin miners. But also, what do you think happens to that BTC? It gets sold eventually. Like, the miners aren't holding this. Like, they're going to scale up their operations. They're going to sell BTC to fund it. And none of it gets burned. So I don't really see that as a bullish thing. Whereas with Ethereum, doesn't matter if fees are low or high. On net, 70 to 80% of it over time and in perpetuity is getting burned. So that is incredibly bullish for ETH as an asset, because it all flows back to ETH value as an asset there. And then the final thing Andy mentioned here, which is, I guess, like not the final thing to be bullish about when it comes to Ethereum, but just the thing that Andy mentioned was Eigenlayer and restaking generally, and Eigenlayer's mainnet going live and AVSs secured by restaked ETH. I've talked about this at length on the refuel. I'm not going to rehash all of those talking points here, but this is just another black hole for ETH, guys. Just another kind of, I guess, value driver for ETH as an asset, restaking generally. And I think that I've described ETH as this kind of thing. There's this ball that's being held underwater before. Like, the amount of demand that we're seeing for ETH right now, and the ball just being held underwater, the person holding that ball underwater, their muscles are about to give out. Like, I really do think that it can only go on for so long before ETH just pops, right? It just pops up massively, and it goes up a lot in price. And I do think we could see ETH at all-time high sooner rather than later due to this. And I mean, I've said it before, but generally I think that right now, or at least over the last couple of months, a lot of ETH's kind of laggy or shitty price action was due to the fact that there's this overhang of the ETF narrative on there. But I think that once that subsides, either a denial or approval, ETH, regardless of a denial or approval, ETH will do quite well there generally, because there's just so much demand for it. There's not much ETH left to buy, guys. Like, and we really are, I think, still at the midpoint of the bull market. I think we're just cooling off before the next expansion phase starts, which in my opinion starts relatively soon. Honestly, I'm still super bullish on this kind of bull market. I don't think we've topped at all in terms of like the bull market top or anything like that. So we're going to keep, I'll keep you guys updated on that one there. But yeah, thanks to Andy for pointing these out. Just gave me an opportunity to do a little bit of a bullish rant there. All right, so actually, I'm going to save this tweet for later, because this is all about growth in the Ethereum ecosystem. So I'm going to save this for later. But what I wanted to give a quick shout out to was EthStaker's new resource for monitoring airdrops to solo stakers. So you can see here that they have a list of projects that have airdropped for solo stakers so far, such as Omni, Starkware, Celestia, and Diva. I don't think Diva has come yet. This is just an announcement here. So you can check that out for yourself. But I'm really, really glad to see that EthStaker has put this out there, because now I have a central repository to link to people when they ask, which projects are airdropping or have airdropped to solo stakers here. I do think that while the trend is kind of intact right now, where more and more projects are doing this, there hasn't been enough that have done it yet. And I think this is due to two reasons. One, there's not enough noise being made about it right now, I think. And two, no one can seem to really agree on which list to use, like which list of solo validators to use, which is kind of frustrating, because we do have good lists. I've shown them before on the refuel. So I think that we need to just basically keep pushing the list that I've shown on the refuel before was this one from GLCNI, I believe. I'm going to bring this up on GitHub here. Yeah, so you can go to this. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But this, I think, is the best list we have right now. If you want to check out the repo here, you can check it out, because it's got, all of the solo stakers that they've been able to identify here, both pre and post merge, as well as rocket pool node operators too, which in my opinion count as solo validators there as well. So I think people should really use, or projects should really use this list. So you can go check that out for yourself if you haven't yet. But yeah, you can go check out EthStaker's new airdrops page for solo stakers if you haven't already. All right, so on to the growth portion of today's refuel, talking about growth not just across L2s, which is going to come up in a sec, but also Ethereum staking generally. So I haven't shown these charts for a while, the validator count chart as well as the staked ETH chart, but I figured it was worth covering this because there's some interesting trends here that I wanted to point out. So when it comes to the number of validators, we can expect this to collapse once EIP 7251 or Max EB comes along in the Pectra upgrade later in the year or early next year, because as you guys know, you'll be able to stake 2048 ETH per validator, which means we're going to see a lot of this consolidate. But right now, we're at almost 1 million validators here. I think we're at 990,000 or something like that. I expect that to get cut in half at the very least, if not less than that, which is very good for the network, guys. Like, that does not mean that we have less security on the network. That does not mean we have less node operators on the network. All that means is that we have less tech debt on the network, and we have a more stable and reliable and scalable network, which is obviously a net positive for everyone. But regardless of that, of Max EB going live, we can study the chart as it is now. So when looking at the validator count chart, it's going to be the exact same as the staked ETH chart here. So I'm going to focus on the staked ETH chart for this portion. So essentially, what I noticed when looking at this chart was that we kind of saw a spike from like May of last year to around, I guess you could say, October of last year. So May to October, what is it, about 6 months there, where the number of ETH staked went up by about 10 million. So from 18 million to like 28 million-ish or something like that, 27.5 million-ish there. So it went up a lot. But then since then, it's been kind of like, it trickled from October to around January. It trickled up by about like a 1.5 million. But then since then, it's gone from January this year at about 29 million up to 31.6 million in April. So over 4 months, we have brought on a bunch of almost 3 million extra ETH stake. So that's more than what we saw previously here. Now, I think that these trends, what they point to is basically a lot to do with kind of restaking generally, and a lot to do with Ethereum staking kind of being de-risked. Because as you know, in April of last year, Shapala went live, right? Where withdrawals went live, and essentially what happened was that staking was massively de-risked. So for the 6 months after that, we basically had this up only, 10 million plus ETH, or around 10 million ETH was staked here because of that de-risking that happened. But then we had a trickling in around until January of this year when the LRT stuff started skyrocketing, right? And restaking was happening during this period as well. But then when LRTs come along, when you could basically stack those points farmings that people were doing with EtherFi, Swell, Puffer, Renzo, and a bunch of others out there, you could basically put your ETH into those, and then they would put that ETH into EigenLayer. So you are now kind of doing this recursive farming or this recursive yield stacking or point stacking, whatever you want to call it there. So that's where this other spike has kind of come from. And that's continued, obviously. But the funny thing about this is that we're all having debates recently, especially when it comes to the ETH issuance curve, over how much ETH is actually going to be staked in, I wouldn't say like the terminal kind of capacity or the terminal velocity, but how much ETH is going to be staked at kind of like, near terminal or near kind of, the maximum amount here. So I've said before that I don't think we're going to get 100% of ETH staked. I don't even think we're going to get like 80, 90% of ETH staked. I could say maybe 60, 70% or something like that. But from here on out, I don't think that there's going to be like a massive flood of ETH stake coming in. I think it's going to keep going up, but I don't think we're going to get like 10 million ETH staked in 6 months. Like, I just don't see that happening, because the more and more ETH that is staked, obviously the less ETH there is to stake, and the less people that care to stake their ETH generally. And I know people will think to themselves, well, if you're not staking your ETH, you're technically losing, you're technically being diluted because you're not getting the new issuance to you. But the thing is that, like, for a lot of people, that new issuance isn't that big of a deal, because if you do the calculus of, okay, well, if the yield for staking, all inclusive, not just the new issuance, but also the fees and the MEV, is 3.5%, but on every year, the price of ETH goes up, like on average, 1 to 200%, well, then you don't really care about missing out on that 3.5% yield, right? Like, it's kind of indifferent. You're kind of indifferent to it, right? It doesn't really mean much to you. And then people will argue, well, what about putting your LSTs or LRTs to work, borrowing against them in DeFi and stuff like that. Well, most people probably don't want to do that. Like the ones that don't want to stake, probably don't want to do that anyway. They're probably trying to get like the least risk exposure to ETH as possible, which is just holding vanilla ETH here. But then I guess like, there's another argument that can be made around the fact that the ETFs, the ETH ETFs, eventually we're going to have like a staked ETH ETF. So what's going to happen is that I think that there's going to be two types of ETFs, this normal spot ETH ETF and then a spot staked ETH ETF. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens there, because at that point, it's a decision between both the, I guess, like ETF manager, whether that be BlackRock or someone else, Van Eck, all these institutions, and the customer. Do they automatically, these institutions, opt in the customer to staking their ETH, or do they ask them if they want to do that? And that becomes another question, because we know that the TradFi world is obsessed with yield. We know that in crypto, like a 3.5% yield isn't really a big deal for a lot of people. I know a lot of ETH holders that don't stake their ETH, guys. Like literally their ETH, it's in cold storage. They don't want to stake their ETH. And the exact reason is because they look at 3.5% and they're like, I don't really care about that. Like I expect ETH to go up so much, when obviously they're not thinking about the fact that that's 3.5% in ETH terms, not in dollar terms. I should have mentioned this before, but still, to them, it's like, I don't understand staking, and I don't want to go with these LSTs or these LRTs because there's kind of risk associated with that, smart contract risk, peg risk, all that sorts of stuff. And that's how they think. They're just like, I just want ETH exposure. That's it. I don't want to mess around with anything else. And they're happy with that because they're still making a return over the long term on their investment because of the fact that they expect ETH to go up, and ETH has historically gone up a lot, right? And will continue to go up from here, as we strongly believe. I mean, if you're buying ETH, you believe it's going to go up in the future. Whether that belief is right or not is another thing, but that's what people are doing here. So then, with TradFi, it kind of changes the conversation, because these are crypto natives that I talk to, or at least people that are not like in the TradFi ecosystem. They're not like investing in stocks. They're not using kind of BlackRock to manage their funds or anything like that. I wouldn't say they're crypto native, but they're definitely people that are in crypto's orbit, so to speak. But in the TradFi world, they're obsessed with yield. So what happens when BlackRock or Van Eck, whoever it is, sends out an email blast to all of their ETH ETF holders and says, hey, we have this new staked ETH ETF thing, and they'll dumb it down for their audience, obviously. But then the headline will be, earn 3% or whatever percentage yield it is on your ETH, minus the fee that they will take, of course. All you have to do is click one button. I do think a lot of people will click that button, because I don't think that the BlackRock and Van Eck and that will make the risks obvious to people. I think what will happen is that they'll just abstract the risks away, and any losses they incur for any reason at all, slashing or what have you, they'll just socialize that amongst their base there. So that's where I think the calculus can definitely change a lot, is when we have like these managed vehicles that can be used to stake. But until that happens, I just don't see like the stake ballooning up like massively anytime soon. I do think staking is going to be up only for quite a while, but it feels like the massive amounts of growth of new stake coming in is going to slow down for a little while here because of the fact of all the reasons I just outlined there. I mean, I could be completely wrong on this, but that's the kind of trend and pattern that I'm seeing right now. But yeah, this is the chart to pay attention to, the staked ETH chart. There are many charts like this. The validator count chart, as I said, that's going to look completely different. It's actually going to look very funny, because let's just say we have this chart and then we're at like 1 million validators when Max EB goes live, and then you just see like a massive drop in the chart to like 500,000 validators. People are going to look at that, and there's going to be FUD around. I already know there's going to be FUD around it. People are going to be like, oh, what happened to all the validators on Ethereum? And when in reality, we'll know that it was just people consolidating their ETH stakes. We're going to do a little bit of FUD fighting at that point. That's how I kind of see that playing out there. But anyway, on to the next thing I wanted to talk about, which was the growth around the Ethereum ecosystem generally, and specifically L2. So Sebastian here put together a nice little tweet where he tweeted out basically usage across all of the Ethereum mainnet and the various Ethereum L2s. He included Polygon in this, but I believe that's the Polygon POS chain, which technically isn't an L2 yet, but will be in the future. So, I mean, even if you kind of like take away Polygon here, it's still up only growth for the rest of the ecosystems, Base, ZK. I mean, it's not even every one of them, right? It's just Base, ZK Sync, Arbitrum, Optimism, and Ethereum Mainnet as well. And this is across active wallets per week, transactions per week, trades per week, and also transfers of USDC weekly here. So it's all up only, which is really, really great to see there. And that's no surprise to anyone paying attention, especially if you've been listening and watching the refuel. I cover this all the time, but I just figured these charts were really nice to show you guys what this looks like. You can check them out for yourself. I'll link them in the YouTube description below. And then, of course, L2 Beat also has their various ways of tracking activity across L2s with the scaling factor here. We saw it spike up quite a bit post Denkun because there was like a mini base season and kind of like a mini L2 season going on there. And they also include Degen chain in this now as well, which is an L3, so it's not just an L2 that's being tracked here, it's an L3 as well, but that's pretty much like been up on average. I mean, it is down from its all-time high right now, but it has been up on average. I mean, this is over the last year, but if you go over the maximum time, it's up only, really. And then, of course, you have all their other kind of pages here, like Value Locked has really been up only on the most part, but this is very sensitive to price movements. Like, if the prices of ETH and some of the other tokens doubled overnight, this TVL would pretty much double as well. So that's why I think that TVL generally is not like the best metric for measuring growth. It measures growth in like asset prices, but if you want to look at TVL as denominated in stuff like ETH, that's also been going up, people bridging ETH into these L2s and so on and so forth from there. Now, of course, another website you can use to track all of the growth of L2s is growthepie.xyz. I've covered this website a lot on the refuel before. I really like their layer 2 user base a chart here where you can basically see it's been up only, not at all-time highs right now, but been up only for ages. Like, it's just, this is what I meant when I said earlier in the episode that it's just been consistent growth for a very long time. You can see that playing out here. And then you can go into any number of other different kind of metrics here. Active addresses, transaction counts, stablecoin market cap, so on and so forth. The general trend is up there. Now, of course, last thing I wanted to talk about was Ethereum and blobs. This is Hildobby's blob dashboard. Now, we're still not anywhere near the target of 3 blobs per block. We're around half of that right now, so 1.4, 1.5 blobs per block here, which means that it's basically free to use blobs right now. I remember I said that we did have a period of time where inscriptions were taking up a lot of blob space, but that doesn't seem to be the case anymore, and no one is doing inscriptions or blob inscriptions right now. In terms of the L2s or the rollups that are using blobs the most, you can see here in blue, Base is far ahead right now. Like, in terms of the amount of data that they're using, they're the biggest. Then in second is Arbitrum, I believe. Then in third place is OP Mainnet, and then you've got the other ones here as well. There are some that pop in and out, like Starknet, for example, will pop in and out depending on the day. And then you've got ZK Sync and Linnea as well. But yeah, Base is definitely the biggest here, and that's because I think Base right now is the one that's seeing the most activity out of all of the L2s, and obviously that's generating more and more data that they have to post down. So they're definitely posting more blobs than everyone else is right now. Not by a substantial amount, but definitely by a pretty healthy amount. I mean, you can see here that over the last 24 hours, Base posted 163 blobs, whereas Arbitrum posted around 73. So yeah, I think Base is double or more than double right now than Arbitrum. And then, I guess much bigger than the other ones put together. But it's not like it's 10 times bigger or anything like that. So definitely going to keep an eye on that, to keep an eye on the different growth between the L2 ecosystems there. But you can find all of these dashboards that I just talked about. I'll link them in the YouTube description below for you to do so. And the last little chart that I wanted to show is this one on the left here. You probably can't see it because of my camera, unfortunately. I don't think I can move it around. Maybe I can actually just click into it and you guys will be able to see it here on my screen. So this is the blob base fee since launch. So since blobs launched on March 14th here, or March 13th, when Denkun went live. So to the left of the chart, you can't see most of it, but it's basically flat. This is the blob base fee. This is basically meaning that blobs were free right up until about the 27th of March until the, the 3rd of April, where you can see the blobscriptions came along and started bidding up blob space here. But then that collapsed, and we've basically been at the same point since, April 3rd, April kind of 4th here, where it's basically been free to post blobs there. So that's another interesting chart that I love keep paying attention to on Hildobby's dashboard here. But I think that's going to be it for today's episode. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give that video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.